Hey, hello there, microbiology friends. Oh, I have my friend Quinkle here. Quinkle, say hi to everybody. She's shy. And she is a perfect guest for today's lecture, talking about vector-borne bacterial diseases. And specifically, the flea. Quinky didn't have fleas. She's a sweetheart. She would never have fleas. Anyway, there are a number of diseases that you probably have heard about that are in fact bacterial caused and transmitted by insect bites. So, to start off with, one of the all-time biggies is a bacteria known as Yersinia pestis. It is a facultative anaerobe, the bacillus, gram-negative, and it is the causative agent of bubonic plague, the plague. That is the Black Death. Now, cases of the plague are pretty rare these days. It does occur, though, in parts of the world. Primarily, the rat flea is the transmitting agent. And so the rats serve as a harbor or a reservoir of the bacteria, and they don't seem to be affected by it too much. And actually, I know there's some really cool interactions with some of the toxins in cellular biology, but we won't get into it. So the rats serve as a reservoir, and then when humans come in contact with the rats, they can pick up a flea bite, and they get the bacteria transmitted into them. The bacteria causes these large lymphatic swellings that are known colloquially as buboes, and this is why it was known as the bubonic plague. You generate these large bumps, and then it'll lead to profuse internal bleeding, ruptured buboes, bad news, and you can spread it around that way too. So there are multiple types of plague, primarily based on the entry. And so we've got bubonic plague, which is highly contagious. The bubonic plague enters in through the bite of the infected flea. The lymphatic system is where the bacteria makes its way and spreads around, and that's what ends up with these little weird bulges and things. You then end up with a variety of things: internal organ damage, hemorrhage, the black hemorrhagic lymph nodes, these are the buboes, and then it can exit in the form of saliva and tears and mucus and stuff, and it's quite contagious. Pneumonic entry, you can have pneumonic plague, and this is when you have the entry into the nose or the eyes or the mouth, much the way COVID is being transmitted, and this would be not requiring the insect, the flea bite. So you get the flea bite somebody, that guy starts spreading it around, and the next people start to pick it up. And then there is septicemic plague, and this is where the bacteria are reproducing in the blood. The bacteria gets into the bloodstream, starts to cause blood clotting and a variety of different kinds of tissue death and things. Uncontrolled bleeding, pretty deadly. So we know that there are antibiotics that can treat this, but you got to get to it reasonably early. So the pandemic, the plague, back in the Middle Ages, between 1347 and 1353, I don't know, that's what's written down there. And if I'm going to ask you, what years for the plague? It's like, no, I ain't going to ask you that. But in the 1300s, this was a really deadly thing. It ripped through, estimates are about a third of the European population died. And this was especially hard on the working class peasants. And there's all kinds of cool historical things that happened from this, in that labor shortages provided the possibility of negotiation and all kinds of the ability of negotiating wages and changes in the work environment. The plague continued to return for centuries. So it is a very serious problem. Primarily, what you got to do is control your rat population. You control the rats, you control the fleas, you control the fleas, you control the plague. So, a couple of other things, though. So these are things that actually happen in the U.S. Cases of plague in the U.S. are phenomenally rare. But tularemia is a small gram-negative coccobacillus is the cause of it. Francisella tularensis, not that anybody cares. This is a bacterium that's found in rabbits and rodents and things. It's transferred primarily, again, by tick bites. It could also be transferred by aerosols, so don't let your rabbit sneeze on you, just as a general rule. This also gets into the lymph nodes. It also gets into the lungs and spleen, kidneys. You generate a mild plague fever, so it's not as severe. Lymph nodes get swollen, and it can cause death, although if treated, it's actually not anything all that serious. Now, a disease, a bacterial borne disease you perhaps heard of but didn't realize that it was from a bacterium, is Lyme disease, which is from a bacterial species known as Borrelia. It is a gram-negative spirochete, fairly small little guy, and it is spread by a specific tick, the deer tick. So here is a picture of the deer tick. Once it lands on you, it's a little tiny guy, like the size of, the head of a pin. They're pretty easily seen, but they're tiny little fellas. Once they have been sucking on you for a while, the blood meal, as it's called, they expand-o-matic and they get quite large. Now, they carry the bacteria in their digestive system, and it doesn't do anything to them. And so they actually have to sit there on you for a while. So it's not something that if you pull the tick off quickly, you really are not at too much of a risk. Looking at the map, there's a lot of it. Where's my red pointer? There. Can you see that? Yeah. A whole bunch up in Wisconsin and into
Michigan.
Actually Michigan and Minnesota. That's the state. So anyway, a whole bunch in Wisconsin, a little bit up in northern Illinois, around Rockford and such. Some also around Gary. It is around in a lot of different places, though, but it's really serious up there, and also in the Northeast, all up in Vermont and upstate New York. So it's found primarily near woods, forest. One thing that happens is the ticks are triggering, or they're sensing the release of carbon dioxide. So any animal that is big enough to kick out enough carbon dioxide is an animal that they want to go ahead and fall on. And so they can be up in the trees, they get the sense of the CO2, and they rain down on top of you. So very early, first off, you got a tick, and they're pretty easy to spot. Whenever you're out in the woods these days, particularly in areas where you have a lot of grass and brush, or you're walking under trees, probably not a bad idea to go ahead and do tick check when you get back inside. They're going to be along the margins of where your clothes are, like your waistband. They can be up and around the edges of your socks. Good idea to check that. And they have to be on you for a while. That's the good news. So if you catch them early, within 24 hours, you probably are pretty safe. If they've been on you for a while, though, they can have the ability to transmit enough of the bacteria into you to cause troubles. And so one of the early symptoms is this very classic sort of bullseye rash. It's not always there. You then can get fever, headache, fatigue, actually a real wide range of symptoms that you can dismiss as just, the blues, as a cold, whatever. And then over time, you end up with really serious issues. The joints, it can begin to affect the heart very severely in damaging heart valves. It can have effects in the central nervous system. It is a pretty serious problem. And again, antibiotics can help. Now, one of the things to think about with antibiotics, and just look at this guy while we pause for a moment. Antibiotics, very useful. There are parts of the body you can't get antibiotics into very effectively, like the old brain. So stuff that gets into your brain, bacterial meningitis, that ends up being a really severe issue because the antibiotic can't circulate very well in the brain. There's the blood-brain barrier that makes it difficult for lots of different compounds to get up into the brain. All right, so Rocky Mountain spotted fever is caused by a really weird bacteria known as a rickettsia. Rickettsia are aerobic, obligate aerobics. They are intracellular parasites. They actually don't have the same kind of cell wall structure that a normal bacteria has, and they actually live inside cells. So they're not free living. You can't culture them on a plate. You got to actually culture them in cells. And they are also transmitted by ticks. So we've got the American dog tick and the Rocky Mountain wood tick. Rocky Mountain spotted fever is primarily known because of the association with the Rocky Mountain wood tick. So again, fever, headaches, muscle pain. You get a pretty good rash. With antibiotics, it is not too nasty. Without antibiotics, a third of the folks that get it will end up meeting their ultimate fate. It is, in fact, endemic in the southern hemisphere or the western hemisphere. Let's see. Another rickettsia-like organism, Rickettsia prowazekii. This is the causative agent of a disease known as typhus or epidemic typhus. It is again gram-negative, an aerobic obligate, intracellular parasite. An odd guy. It is bacteria growing within inside the cells. It is not free living. And this is being transmitted by lice, by the human body louse. Ew. So symptoms, again, we got headache, fever, sort of flu-like symptoms. The rash can spread, and that's one of the ways that people can begin to identify it. So you get it's pretty lethal if it's not treated. It can actually remain inside the body and actually show and manifest itself later as a variety of different kinds of manifestations, particularly if you're immune compromised. So rickettsias, they can end up in people that are on anti-rejection drugs, like after transplants, and they are, again, not all that easy to get rid of. They're weird guys. Rickettsia organisms are strange fellows. They can end up infecting cells. Even in the lab setting, cell culture systems can be infected by rickettsia. Another kind of typhus is Rickettsia typhi. You get a rash, vomiting, diarrhea. It's rare that it causes death, but it is a problem. It is found primarily in the tropics. It is on the rat flea, and so the rats serve as the reservoir for the bacteria. Again, another one of those weird intracellular bacteria. All right, so that covers us in terms of the bacteria types that can get into skin or get in through the skin through some kind of puncture. We're going to next turn on Wednesday and turn our attention to sexually transmitted bacterial diseases. Won't that be fun? God only knows what the photos will look like. All right, I'm working on the exams. I do my best to get you to put them as in DocX format, but it's still a pain in the whatever, a pain in the rickettsia. On Moodle, some of you didn't put your name on the exams. That makes it that much more tricky as well. But we're learning. It's a learning process, and I'm a lifelong learner. Oh, God. The whole semester sucks. Hey, have a good advising day tomorrow. Good luck, and I will talk with you on Wednesday. I'm Dr. G, and I'm out of here.